Wario needs no introduction. Feels like every other year we get a brand new Wario game in the form of WarioWare, a game made of many microgames with an extended cast that never shows up outside of the series. It's a little odd. You'd assume that's all there is to Wario beyond showing up for tennis or go-karting. Well, I'm sure you already know, but if you don't, Wario actually has a historied adventure in the world of platforming, and honestly, it's one of the most experimental series Nintendo has. The last game in the Wario Land series was Wario Land Shake It on the Wii in 2008. That's almost 20 years ago, and worse yet, Shake It flopped. Unfortunately, as a result of that, Wario Land took the back seat and was never seen again. But it's never been more clear that the people yearn for a brand new Wario Land game, now more than ever, with Pizza Tower and Anton Blast's rise to popularity being heavily inspired by Wario Land 4. Nintendo have brought back Endless Ocean, Advance Wars, Another Code, even Kirby Air Ride. It's safe to say that Wario Land can surely be next on the table. I, for one, think it is simply a matter of time, but knowing what a new entry should be requires looking at what the series is, and for Wario it's a series that prides itself on completely reinventing itself each time. Today I will be talking about Wario Land 3 and 4 in specific, as these are the games I've finished playing and the games that I've convinced myself that Nintendo have a clear Wario Land shaped hole in the lineup for. But first, some context. Who is Wario? Similar to Yoshi, Wario existed as a backdoor pilot character off the back of a mainline Mario sequel. Just like how Super Mario World 2 was secretly Yoshi's first game, Super Mario Land 3 was the first Wario Land game. This is because the second game in the Mario Land series introduced Wario for the first time as the main antagonist. Introduced as an opposite of what Mario in every way, he was heavy and grotesque, obscenely rich and greedy. He steals Mario's island, Mario Land, and then brainwashes the inhabitants to believe he is their master. As a result, when Wario Land Super Mario Land 3 came out, it was heavily derived from Mario Land, naturally. The difference was that Wario's was significantly heavier, and instead of using mushrooms to power up, Wario would need garlic. Like Mario, Wario would sport a bunch of power-ups, but they would be represented by a variety of different hats, and the physically imposing Wario would be a lot more aggressive than Mario in that he could shoulder bash into enemies, throw enemies and break parts of the environment. This first game saw Wario in pursuit of his own castle. He travels to the Kitchen Island to find treasures and coins the brown sugar pirates led by Captain Syrup have stolen, including a big gold statue of Princess Peach, that he thinks he can sell back to Mario for his very own castle. The game is similar to Mario Land, but Wario's capitalistic and greedy intentions and brash, aggressive ways of getting through levels makes it into its very own. Wario Land even got a sequel on the infamous Virtual Boy, many tout to be the best game for that console, although I can't imagine it's tough competition. But that game sees Wario falling down a great big hole and having to find his way back up to the surface, and the way to do that is of course through money and treasures he finds along the way. The game being for the Virtual Boy means it plays a lot with perspective, as Wario is able to jump between the foreground and background. It's a pretty short game, but it's only further solidifying Wario's identity. What did that better though is Wario Land 2, the game that introduced Wario's immortality and replaced his power-ups with transformations, caused by different enemies attacking him. For example, if there's a wasp gunning for you, you're not going to lose health or simply get knocked back, but instead Wario's head swells up and lets you slowly float up. If Wario is set on fire, no, he doesn't die, instead he runs rapidly with his ass on fire until he becomes one with the flame, which can break certain bits of terrain. This system further cements Wario's uniqueness and feels quite smart. It contributed to the focus on puzzles and exploration in the series, but Wario Land 2 was still a linear game. Though its complex web of routes and endings was something that would only be implemented further in terms of non-linearity in Wario Land, In Wario Land 2, there are many moments where you can stray from the intended story path and go down an alternate path, giving players new levels entirely and different endings. In a short window of time, Wario changed and evolved quite rapidly, but it all culminated in a 1-2 punch of a series entries that I feel truly define Wario as a platforming legend. Wario would of course go on to define himself with microgames as well, and after the failed revival of the series, it seemed like that's what Wario is, but to me Wario and his place in platforming is much more important. Even beyond the Land series, Wario has had a weird DS spin-off that wasn't exactly well received, or a full-on jump to 3D with Wario World that feels like it doesn't even exist. There's likely way more to Wario than you'd think as the main anti-hero. The start of Wario Land 3 is instantly quite funny, as Wario flies a plane across the title screen but the fuel gives up on him and sends Wario crashing down to the ground. His stuff is completely missing, and clearly his memory, since he seems to have absolutely no recollection of how to do anything he could do before outside of the basics. Anyways, he enters a cavern that has a small music globe that looks like it has an entire world in it. Lo and behold, it is indeed an entire world, and he is sucked into it. A kind, large face greets Wario inside the temple of the small music box world that he got sucked in. I mean, he's telling Wario where to go, and he's a huge foreboding face bathed in shadows, so that can only mean good things for Wario. Anyways, the mysterious man tells Wario to find pieces of the music box to reclaim his powers, and in turn Wario will be able to escape and keep the treasures. Well, personally that's enough for me, so I'm going to trust this weird guy. So, when you exit the temple, you see an overworld map and one level available to you. Entering it out of the woods, you're instantly aware of the fact that you are limited in your abilities, and worse yet, there are several keys and chests you can see in the distance but you have no way of reaching at the moment. However, the grey key and chest are accessible, and that's enough for now, as it unlocks the next level. That's the way the game works. It teases you with 4 treasures per level, but not all of them are accessible immediately, and so it encourages backtracking with abilities you'll get that can eventually help access these inaccessible areas. Now, for me personally, the 2D Metroid games are so addictive because of this premise, and unsurprisingly Wario Land 3 hooked me in a similar way because of that. It's so fascinating because Wario Land 3 is a Metroidvania by the way of a 2D Mario. Levels are all open, but they're ultimately not part of a big open world that connects everything. Instead, they're self-contained. But don't be mistaken, Wario Land 3 is actually a huge game regardless of how segmented it may seem. Most treasures interact with the world to varying degrees. Of course, you have the normal moveset upgrades such as high jumping boots, gloves to grab and throw enemies, and the ability to actually swim under the water. But others can change aspects of a level by adding elements like vines that allow you to climb up to inaccessible areas, or being able to be flown around by a purple owl that you couldn't reach before, or simply opening doors. The game feels so dynamic, and each time you get a treasure it feels like the game wants to tell you there's something new in about 4 levels at once, which gets you going back to these old levels. And the best part is, most of the time it opens up a completely different section to these levels, so you never really feel like you're just repeating the same level 4 times. The game is absolutely a puzzle platformer at its core, because each of these treasures are puzzles to be solved. You don't just find them, you have to find a key corresponding to the colour of the chest itself, but the key and chest aren't always right next to each other, and will require usage of the new ability you got or the various transformations that Wario can achieve. This game in general is weird. Befitting the Wario's name and following from Mario Land standards, Wario's levels can often be standard in biome but with a twist. Yes, they're starting in the woods, but it's not long before Wario is jumping across cities and unusual biomes. You're even at risk of being attacked by zombies. But my favourite part is the unexplained humanoid rabbit that loves playing football with your body, that you have to in turn do the same to. This could not be in a Mario game, and stuff like that makes it very distinct. This is truly an unusual game. It's then not that surprising to learn that Nintendo R&D 1 were responsible for this game and the entire Wario Land series. They were also responsible for the Metroid series, and Wario Land actually has a lot of DNA from Metroid because of that. I think it's pretty fascinating that the two series share some common ground like that, but it felt right when I learnt it. It has a similar sense of magic in the ways you figure out how to progress, keeping you fully hooked. And this isn't a short game either. Wario Land 3 can take you way longer than it even took me, as I finished the game with many treasures still not found that I may go back and find later, because the game just keeps opening up paths or showing you new levels for every single treasure you get. With each treasure being a level of its own, Wario Land 3 could feasibly have up to 100 levels included. It's a really ambitious game, especially for a Game Boy Color game. It isn't without its flaws though, as the game chooses to waste your time instead of wasting your health. Wario being immortal means you can't be killed, but enemies can send you back, and even when they're useful for transformations, those transformations are often used as obstacles, completely undoing your progress just because of one mistimed jump. It's not that it's hard, it's that it's unforgiving of one mistake that will make you do an entire challenge all over again, simply because you were hit once. At that point, I'd rather have health, as it feels the same. The general idea of Wario is so fascinating to me, and I'd be curious to see how they evolved it, maybe connected everything more tightly. Just a year later, Wario Land 4 releases, and it basically undoes the whole Wario thing. It's pretty interesting actually, because Wario Land 4 feels like a reinvention of a series in a long hiatus, yet this game was made just a year after Wario Land 3, and I suppose they decided that Wario Land 3 had done what they wanted to do with the series at that point, and they wanted to change gears yet again. And I've got to hand it to them. Wario Land 4 moved a lot of needles, and has essentially spawned a genre of its own based on its own gameplay. But first, some context. Wario is absolutely booking it in his car to a pyramid that has suddenly been discovered in the middle of the jungle. For wealth and treasure purposes, of course. A small, unassuming black cat follows him, clearly in need of help associated with the pyramid. When Wario enters the pyramid and picks one of the 4 main passages, he enters a painting via a dimensional portal opened by a blue frog machine. Yeah, this one is pretty weird to explain. Anyways, it's insane to see the leap of aesthetics compared to Wario Land 3, just 1 year later. But of course, this was a Game Boy Advance game, and it was taking advantage of that. This game is seriously one of the reasons GBA graphics are genuinely timeless, as I feel Wario Land 4 is still one of the best looking pixel art games of all time. The detail is gorgeous, and it manages to portray a Saturday morning cartoon vibe all the same, with that zany appeal of Wario in general. Instantly, you're acquainted to the controls with a tutorial temple level, where you find that you no longer have to build up your Wario as he comes fully built up with every ability from the get-go. This game is no longer a Metroidvania, opting for a more linear traditional platformer, but that's not to say it's lost its identity or becomes any less unique. When you're done with the tutorial, you'll enter Palm Tree Paradise, a calming, bright, tropical level. As you explore the level, you'll find chests that have a quarter of a crystal, incentivizing you to find all 4, so the exploration is still here, just maybe not as foundational. These crystal pieces are pretty hard to miss. They make sure to keep them close to the main path, and that's because these crystals per level build towards opening the boss door per passage, so they're required to progress. I enjoyed trying to sleuth where they were, but because you're required to get all 4 in your first run, it means the levels don't have nearly as much expensive replayability. However, that's not the point here. You'll come across a sentient key that will follow behind Wario, and next to it is another blue frog machine. When you jump on it this time, a timer starts and the level starts shaking. The reason levels are less methodical and puzzle based is because you're now meant to book it back to the start of the level to escape before time runs out. Now the timer is pretty forgiving, but it never gets old. It's the thrill of trying to get out of the level as quick as you can. Wario gains his very own speed booster in this game, as he can shoulder bash to extreme speeds in addition to his previous movement options I glossed over in Land 3, like rolling down slopes and stuff like that. That core mechanic is so addictive that it fuels the entire game and really gives it that feeling that you're in an Indiana Jones movie, where the artifacts are cursed and can put you in active danger. But I think the best part of Wario Land 4 is that it mixes this with some of the coolest levels I've seen in a platformer. Each level feels so weird, otherworldly and unique, and comes packed with their very own unique gimmicks. A highlight has to be the toy-themed section of the levels, where each level has an entirely different gimmick, such as matching shapes, dominoes you need to get ahead of to progress, and an unsettling artist that constantly harasses you with their drawings coming to life. But beyond that, you'll platform among the bugs, bash your way through a toxic landfill, or even play some Wario-sized pinball. Transformations such as the Flat Wario and Swollen Wario are massively improved, but how they never feel like they overstay their welcome, or can be controlled a lot better. In Land 3, the Swollen Wario just floats slowly, but in Land 4, you can speed up the float as if he's a balloon losing air. For a game less methodical, it makes sense, but the wasting of time was the biggest gripe with Wario Land 3, and this game feels like it takes the exact opposite approach. In addition, Wario is actually no longer immortal and he can die and has health in this game, which means there's less extreme setbacks this time and less tedium in general. I feel even the bosses got to go up here, as they are all mechanically unique and fun. and I loved naturally figuring out how they worked through experimentation because of what I felt would make sense. I really enjoyed these bosses. My favourite might have been the massive inflatable teddy bear that you need to throw a pin on to make it come down so you can shoulder bash it around and hurt the actual boss that's using the bear as a vehicle. It's safe to say that Wario Land 3 and 4 are vastly different approaches to what a Wario Land game can be and who Wario is in the platforming field. Because of that, it would hurt me so much to know that we will never see one again. Such vastly different approaches to one character, and both exceeding with flying colours in their specific niches. Wario Land Shake It continues from Wario Land 4's setup, but for a series like Wario Land that has such varying approaches, it may have felt like a simply inferior version. And if they were ever to make a new game, would they want to do that again? Especially with Peter Tao and Anton Blas honing into this niche recently, it may feel tame by comparison. Going back to a level-based Metroidvania may seem a little weird when Wario Land feels defined by what 4 did. It's a weird position to be in. And the true answer to what they can do is, well, experiment. I think they need to go with whatever feels right for what a Wario Land game can be in the 2020s. I think a puzzle platformer would manage to differentiate itself from Mario, DK, Yoshi or Kirby in Nintendo's lineup. I think it would be very ambitious to almost Metroid Dread it and make an interconnected Wariovania for real. Arguably my favourite option. Perhaps the cooperative nature of the Switch and Switch 2 would favour a co-op Wario Land game. People have asked for a Wario and Waluigi game, so why not add Waluigi to Wario Land's canon and have him be his player too? In games like Mario Wonder, the co-op thrives in chaos, but the level design suffers for it, as it can't be as contained and geared towards single player. However, if you have a 2-player Wario Land game, you can still keep the unique intricacies of the levels intact. Though it opens up another question of, if this game heavily builds levels around co-op, will it suffer in single player when you don't want to play with other people? Well, I feel like that could be something they could consider. However, with the way Luigi was handled on Luigi's Mansion 3, that could be a good solution. Alternatively, if they want to just continue Wario Land 4's path, but build on it more in a successful way, they could absolutely open up these levels more so that each run of the levels could be different paths of collectibles Mario gets. In Wario Land 3, there are 8 coins that you had to get all in one run to count. Well, how about you do that for this new Wario Land if it's like Land 4, and they can be slightly off the main path so that you're going through the level again but in a completely different way. However, whether or not they can do it is less of an issue because Nintendo have so many teams that work on very specific series that they keep going consistently. This leaves a big issue for series like Wario Land, where R&D 1 no longer exists and 2D Metroid already suffered for it, but eventually got outsourced to Mercury's team. Goodfield did take on Wario eventually, but considering that they now handle Yoshi, a series that Nintendo definitely want to grow, makes me feel like they aren't going to touch Wario again. So where does that leave us? Next level games are always brought up for like every single series in existence, but in all fairness, they are just a well-rounded team that prove every time they can do a good range of different genres, especially their animation and art direction departments are very strong, and Wario Land is absolutely a series that needs those two things. I've seen some people suggest Mercury's team under supervision of Sakamoto, like Metroid, and this would be really cool, perhaps as an interim between Metroid 6 and 7, if they're here for the long haul of course. And I'm not sure if they could emulate the style you come to expect from Wario Land. What if, just like Donkey Kong Bonanza came from their successful 3D platforming team, that the reins for a new Wario Land comes from the team behind Super Mario Wonder? That game clearly was inspired by the weirdness of Mario Land and in turn Wario Land, and it could be a good stopgap between Mario games for them. That's if they're not already doing a new Donkey Kong Country game. Another important thing to note is that on NSO there is only Wario Land 3 and 4 and not the first or second game, and Virtual Boy Wario Land remake was planned and cancelled for the 3DS. It puts into question if Nintendo were going to remake either of these games first as a way to test the waters. In that case, I feel like Wario Land 2 might be the best pick to acquaint people with how Wario Land works due to its introduction of transformations and immortality. Although Virtual Boy Wario Land may need the remake significantly more because it's unavailable to play anywhere at the moment. Perhaps if they remade Virtual Boy Wario Land and added onto it further with aspects of later Wario Land games, that could be ideal as a way to preserve the game, but also test the waters for the series going forward. course, there's also the possibility that they're attempting to revive Wario in platforming in a bigger way by making a new 3D Wario game. Although no matter how much I think that would be cool, I feel that's extremely unlikely. But don't mistake it as me saying I don't think that should happen, because it would be amazing. Imagine if the Odyssey team made it too. God, that team should be expanded even more so we can get that and not worry about Donkey Kong and get a goated 3D Wario game. There are a lot of possibilities for Wario in platforming, and I didn't even cover everything, but Wario is iconic and recognisable, and the Land series has had a bit of a renaissance with Wario-like games coming out and being massive hits, which gives me a lot of hope. Nintendo have shown us that they're willing to revive a dead series even if they know it won't be a massive hit, and the real hurdle is whether or not there is a pitch or someone really gunning for it. Wario Land may seem redundant for Nintendo, with a very regular Wario series existing already, and many 2D platformers in their current repertoire, but with everything I've said before, I feel that Wario Land isn't just another 2D platformer, and it's extremely inventive and unique, and arguably Nintendo's finest.